I studied art at JJ College, and when I graduated, I wanted to continue and I wanted to basically get into making films, but I couldn't afford to study more. I needed to get onto a job, and around that time there was this Bombay International Film Festival for shorts, animation, and features, which used to keep happening. Shorts, animation, and documentaries. So I watched some Polish animation there, and that's where I realized that even if I love to paint, and I graduated as a artist, and I wanted to get into cinema, maybe animation is something that brings the two together. Because I was watching animation which is not really cartoon films, which is not necessarily just Disney. It was artistic animation, author-driven animations, which is happening in the rest of the world. So I felt if I continue, proceed with my art, learn on the job in an animation studio, somewhere, someday, sometime, I'll be able to make a film of my own. So that was what got me into the field of animation. When I got into the job, it was very much like doing the Disney kind of animation. But that was nice because I learned the skill of animation, which comes only from a classical, conventional style. Learned the skill on the job. And cinema was just watching films in festivals, listening to people, going and acting in FTII films, vicariously doing my studies. And that kind of balanced itself out. I kept working, pursuing it, then managed to form my own style in 2D animation, which is painted frame by frame. Simply because I learned animation on the job at a time when the computers hadn't come in. So we learned the traditional style, animating on 35 millimeters. And that remains my basis for animation even today. I use machines, but I still go back on the traditional frame by frame painted animation style. And that has actually worked in my favor because very rarely people do hand-drawn animation anymore. So Bombay Rose, I think, has caught on and is so popular, and it's taken to people's imagination purely for this fact that every frame is painted. See, I would compare it to something like hand-woven textiles as opposed to how the machines have taken over. You get thousands of the same kind, but if it is hand-woven, you have one only. If it's a hand-embroidered piece, it has its mistakes, it has its flaws. But the preciousness of it is that somebody has done it painstakingly by hand. And if you see the way the market has worked now, people want to get back to this precious, small-scale industry which is doing things artistically with passion, with labor of love. So no matter how much technology comes in and takes over, there will always be an appeal for something that is not really taken over by the technology, but is conventional in its sense, and it's hand done. So traveling through Bombay, sitting in a rickshaw, sitting in a taxi, stuck in the traffic jam, the way life pours out around you, it's always about people working who have come from various places from the country and working and trying to build their lives. So this is basically the milieu I have grown up in, I have been surrounded with, and theirs was the story I wanted to tell. If there is a young boy and a young girl in the streets of Bombay selling flowers and they fall in love with each other, how would they come to terms with it? So this is something that stayed in my imagination. I learned about their lives, I learned about the way the migrants are pushed to a corner in the city, whereas they're the ones who are building it, they're the ones who are cleaning it, they're the ones who are making it work, but they're not given the rights of being, or voting rights, or rights of housing or water, or any of those things, but they still survive. So these survival stories was something that I wanted to capture in my way of storytelling. What I do in animation a lot is I don't touch fantasy and epic proportions. I touch the inner self, which is the dreams, the imagination, which also I feel is something that is not easy to do in live action. But in my films, I can have a character who's sitting selling flowers in the streets of Juhu, going into a mind space where she goes back to the land that she came from. In the story, it is Mandu. So it's the palaces of Mandu, how it used to be at that time, using miniature paintings, the Kangra miniature paintings of that place as a graphic form, to go from reality into a dream world. And this, I feel, can only be done in animation. The beauty of the festival is it is not competitive. It is in a small and a very beautiful place with great weather. And the kind of audience which comes here comes from all over the world. And also people from the mountains who are not, it's not the same audience that you get, say, in a place like Bombay, Calcutta, Bangalore. The collection of films, the selection of films that they have, it's not huge, but it's very beautifully curated. And just about all the directors manage to come here. So for me, what is special is I can meet directors over a period of time, and we are not really competing with each other. We're simply looking at films as cinema. And that's, I think, very few festivals now have that quality. It's either festivals with markets, festivals with competitions, big festivals. So the beauty of this is it's small and it's intimate. For filmmakers in general, it's very different for the way you pursue a live action film as you would animation film. If at all you're planning to do animation, you need to have a very good knowledge of animation. Either you know animation yourself or you learn it to the extent that you know what can or cannot be done in animation before you try to write for animation or direct animation. I've been approached by a lot of people who have ideas, but the first thing is like, you need to know the medium. Idea is one thing. It's the same as, when you have an idea for a live action film, you need to know how cinematography works, you need to know how editing works, you need to know how shooting, how dealing with actors needs to be known. The same way with animation, you need to know how something moves frame by frame. So instead of just jumping into wanting to do an animation film, educate yourself about animation, learn a little bit of it, do it. And I know that sounds like it puts off half the people when they want to do animation, but it's better. It's better to do live action, the medium that you know, than to get into a medium that you don't know. And the other factor is patience, huge amount of patience. Each film can take about 7 to 8 years to make, and this is the standard all over the world when they're doing animation, whether it's 3D animation, 2D. So you need to give a very much bigger part of your life to make one single film. It's not going to be 6 months shooting and then get on to the next one. So you need to be patient, you need to be hardworking, dedicated, and then, in my case, you need to fight the wars if you're not doing something conventional. But even if you're doing something conventional, the other three things are a given.